This episode of the MarTech Matrix is brought to you by Blurbs AI, where brands and agencies go to discover the best MarTech vendors and learn their value without the hassle of a sales pitch. It's a place vendors want to be so that they can be discovered. Check it out for yourself at blurbs.ai.
Welcome to the MarTech Matrix, the podcast that cogently uncovers the business problems each tech company was built to solve and how brands are using them to solve their own needs. Today, Sean speaks with Aaron Zagha, CMO of Newton Baby, makers of the safest baby mattresses and bedding products on the market. After the show, head on over to themartechmatrix.com for show notes, contact information, and details on upcoming episodes. Now, get ready to enter the Matrix.
Aaron, welcome into the Matrix. How are you today?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
Good. I'm doing good. I'm excited for this conversation because this is our first conversation with someone who's not on the marketing technology vendor side. So we've published 25 episodes this year, all interviewing founders or senior level folks at tech companies. And now we are going to start to get the perspective of people that work at the brands, both from e-commerce and a marketing perspective. And in your role, you oversee both marketing and e-commerce. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't really differentiate between the two. There is no e-commerce without marketing. So
yeah, well, they should work together anyway. It probably makes for a better business. So again, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself in your role, your career.
Sure. So I am the CMO at Newton Baby. Newton specializes in primarily baby-related sleep products, so crib mattresses, bassinets, pack and plays. Company's 10 years old. I joined 6 years ago now. And my career has been pretty bifurcated, actually. First half of my career was in finance and banking. And then the second half has been in e-commerce and online marketing. Yeah.
That's an interesting blend. It probably gives you a unique perspective on marketing and maybe some responsibility around the marketing budgets and the dollars that you spend maybe more wisely. So tell us, do you use cutting edge tech to market cribs or just rely on the old age adage of sleep like a baby pitch?
We do a little of both. I mean, the sleep like a baby does find its way throughout our marketing. But I like to think we're pretty tech driven and cutting edge as well. So we have a pretty robust tech stack. We're constantly experimenting with new vendors. But a lot of the usual culprits. We use Shopify for our D2C platform, Shopify Plus, with a bunch of customizations. And I mean, so many apps, I don't even know where to begin in terms of just Shopify plugins. We're ListTrack for email, Tenza for SMS, Yapo for reviews. Elevar for server-side tracking, Yoda for JavaScript and third-party optimization. So lots of tech.
Yeah, the plugins at Shopify, it makes it really easy, right, to get set up with a vendor. Do you find that it's sort of like your iPhone, you go to the App Store, you're like, it's free, it's a free app, just keep downloading. And does that become a problem at any point where you have all these different solutions integrated to the website?
It does a little bit. And so we do cleanups at least once a year where we'll just go and delete old stuff. And I mean, especially and that's one of the things that we use Yoda for, is to make sure that all these plugins don't slow down the site. But regardless, I think it's important to kind of weed out the old ones and make sure that you are as clean as possible and things aren't, delaying load times, things like that.
Yeah. How do you go about deciding which ones to install, or if it's easy to install, how do you go about testing them out?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of trying to find an answer to a specific need, and then things that I hear about just through industry connections or talking to peers or whatever else. So if I'm talking to someone and they say, oh, we're seeing incredible attachment rates on order protection, I'll say, oh, we need an order protection app. Or there will be something very specific, like I want to analyze purchases on specific page paths and, a very detailed metric that I can't tease out of GA or something. And I'll see if there's a plugin that's specifically suited to that item.
What's the difference if you're using like a Shopify app for something rather than, I'm sure you get hit with, vendors calling you all the time saying, try our solutions. And I imagine some of them are also on Shopify, but like, when do you decide to go with like an enterprise solution that's not on Shopify versus just go click install?
I mean, I think at this point, all the enterprise guys have Shopify apps, but it's always a little harder to fully integrate them anyway. But there's no rhyme or reason. It's either someone that we want to work with has a Shopify app or they don't. It's not the other way around.
Got it. Okay. Are there any gems that you found on the Shopify App Store that like, you probably wouldn't have found if you weren't like just poking around?
I mean, we've been using one-click upsell for a long time, and it's such a easy, lightweight app. And I think we did find it because I had heard of this capability, and then I went searching in the App Store and came across it. And now it's become, I think, pretty much one of the dominant apps for that use case. But we love it. We use it to death. It's dramatically increased upsell and post-purchase upsell as well.
So is it just like a one click, like to add it to the cart, or is it more like Amazon's one click?
It's more like a pop-up you serve either in cart or post-purchase that says add this item and get 30% off of it.
Got it. So you set up all the business rules in the back end.
You set up all the controls, all the flows, this then, if then, all that.
Got it. Okay. From a marketing perspective, what channels have you found? I mean, obviously, you have a unique business. You know your target audience really well. It's either you're having a baby and you need a crib, or things that go along with having a baby, or you don't. What channels do you tend to focus on?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah, and this is kind of by design, but at any given point in time, we're running north of 25 channels, probably half of which are permanent, half of which are in test mode. I really think that given how dynamic our industry is, you constantly have to be testing and iterating. And, when TikTok first started getting traction during the pandemic, I loved it personally. And so I asked for volunteers on my team in terms of who wanted to run it. And we just got lucky that it took off and we scaled with it kind of. But CPMs were super cheap, but then, about a year and a half ago, they got super expensive on TikTok, and we needed to find new sources of kind of top of funnel, cheap prospecting ads. So I think you constantly have to be testing. That having been said, the usual suspects for us are all big and scaled. So Google, Meta, TikTok, kind of in that order. Specific to our baby corner of the world, Pinterest works really well. The first thing a woman generally does when she hears she's pregnant is go and design her nursery on a Pinterest board. So it works out really well. Measurement was very challenging at first until we got a little more sophisticated on the measurement and attribution front, but it works really well for us. And then other channels like Snapchat don't. Yeah. So I really like to test them all. And it changes over time too. So sometimes we even retest old channels we didn't work for us the best.
I can see how influencers could be a strong play for this category. So how do you track which influencers can make a parent say, I need that crib, instead of just scrolling by it?
It's funny. Influencers are our biggest channel by spend, and it's certainly the most vexing. You can't geo-lift test influencers. And so we work with, 100 influencers a month or so. And in the beginning, you should see our tracking spreadsheet. Like, I really tried to find things that were predictive. Like, I'm a quanti guy. So I had my team, or our influencer agency, keep track of things like, are they a first-time mom? Do they have a daughter or a son? What were they focused on before they became a mom influencer? Like, all these different attributes. And running regression analyses and trying to see if anything was predictive, like where are they based, geo, size, of course, day of week, time of, everything. And there's so little that's predictive at any kind of significance. And so, it's really test and learn for us. You really have to have a diversified portfolio type approach when it comes to influencers, because even in any given month, if you're working with 100, 50 are going to work, 50 aren't. And the 50 that do work, may be new, they may be old, but sometimes influencers we've been working with for years just stop performing. and you just never know which one's going to perform when. And so you really have to be diversified on it. But I wish there were things that were predictive, and we found very few things that are.
It's funny how in digital marketing over the years, all these, we'll call them new channels pop up, but they're really not new. They're just going further and further back in time and just putting a nice new package on it, right? This is basic word of mouth marketing, but it's just somebody that we find in the digital world that we don't really know, we trust. How do you go about finding them and keeping that fresh? Do you just have people scouring the internet looking for influencers? Do you use a platform? How does that happen?
We actually, so we run an influencer 4 different ways. We run micros basically in-house. We've used platforms. We test the platform, then we don't like it, then we test it. I don't know. But for macros, we use an agency that's been really remarkable and that kind of grew with us. And their DNA was on trackability, which is very unique for influencer and actually driving measurable performance. So we were very aligned that way. The founder had come from being in-house and had really strong performance. And so they work with a very small handful of brands. They track performance across all those brands. When an influencer stops performing for one brand, they're very careful about renewing them for other brands. And we measure everything that can be possibly measured for influencers. So we do a lot of Instagram stories so we can track clicks. We do unique custom codes for each influencer, which is a lot, given there's 100 a month. We do post-purchase analysis where the customer can even write in which influencer they heard about Newton from. And we kind of put all of those metrics together to measure performance as best as we possibly can. But it's still an art form and kind of always will be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I feel like the last couple of years, I spent a lot of time researching and talking to tech companies that focus in on measurement, whether it's incrementality or MMM or MTA or whatever it is. And I think I'm coming to the realization that it's not one or the other. It really comes down to people. Like, do you have the right people that understand the data, that can analyze the data? Because every business is a bit unique. And so, yes, you need the tools. But if you just have the tools and not the right people, then it's just going to collect dust. And if you have people and not the right tools, they can't move fast enough. So you got to find that blend. And if you don't have it in-house, go rent it and bring those people in for this, to get you set up on a plan. It sounds like that's how you approach it as well.
Yeah, I think so. We've always been a combination of in-house and agency. I like agency provided that incentives are aligned, which often they're not with percent of ad spend. That's garbage. Don't ever do that. But the thing that I love about agency is you benefit from institutional knowledge across other clients, especially when they have clients that are bigger and better than you, clients that have better Facebook reps, for example, or that are in the disruption, other clients that have access to more things than you do, and you're benefiting from that knowledge. That's a huge unlock that you get from an agency that you can't get from in-house, unless your in-house guy is networking constantly.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So yeah, you have to combine the two.
Yeah. How is obviously there's been a lot of talk this year. Cookies are going away. They're not going away. Now we're going to have, the consent banner popping up more. Google's trying to still figure it all out. What has that done to a business like yours, right? Were you left scrambling initially trying to figure out what you're going to do when cookies go away? And then you're like, oh, they're not going to go away. It's like, phew, but then you've wasted all this time. Like, how has it been an impact on a business your size?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you prepare the best you can for these kinds of things. So that's why we instituted LVAR and server-side tracking. And, we moved to Facebook Copy as soon as it was available. And all of these, so you do the best you can do. But at the end of the day, there's something to be said for knowing what works. And what works is just making sure you're serving impressions to the right people and that those impressions aren't too expensive. And, like when the iOS changes came out, everyone's freaking out. Oh my God, my Facebook ROAS plummeted. Well, no, it didn't. Just what you can see and measure did. But like, you're still serving those impressions, and chances are your marketing efficiency ratio across the whole company didn't change at all. So people were freaking out, and some companies probably were hurt, companies that were like instant purchase type companies. But we're a long considered purchase, average 20 plus day time to purchase. And no, like the fact that our ROAS in dashboard went down didn't change anything about our business or how we thought about it. The other thing is the more these that kind of in dashboard trackability diminishes, or cookies, whatever else, the more important other forms of measurement are, whether that's MMM or incrementality. I prefer the latter. But if you're doing incrementality testing, it neutralizes. You're not leaving cookies at all. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And you're seeing causation. So making sure that you're doing incrementality and taking a step back and focusing on what works for your business, I think, are ways to save yourself a heart attack or two.
Yeah. I mean, it gets us back to basics, right? Like I remember years ago sitting down with someone and looking at all of their campaigns and all the revenue that they thought they drove. And I stopped and I'm like, do you have that much money in the bank? Is that actually what you got? And they're like, oh, no, this is all double counted. Like, what are you doing? Like, how do you know who drove what? Like, of course, everyone's going to take credit for it. So you can't just rely on the cookies. And I think we've gotten lazy as an industry. And I think this is a big wake up call to start using your brains, right? I mean, start analyzing the data, and it's not just one thing, it's many things. Which leads us to where AI fits into the equation as a marketing and e-commerce leader. What are some of the sort of impactful ways AI has impacted, your business on either side or both?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different arenas of AI we can talk about. So one is on the ad platforms themselves, and we've seen great success with PMax and Google, and we initially saw pretty good success with ASC and Facebook, but we found that we can't scale it much at all. So it seems like the platforms are doing a fairly good job implementing AI. And then there's the arena of what we're doing, ourselves in-house on site. And I think there is some tech that's benefiting quite a bit in terms of on our site. And the most obvious that jumps to mind is using LLMs for chatbots. So we switched our chatbot from, 1,000 if-then statements to an LLM, and we saw both a huge increase in resolution rates, but also a decrease in pricing because, basically you don't need complexity there anymore. And then there's other platforms and emerging tech that is interesting. We're using it for CRO right now. And instead of A/B testing, we're doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, basically letting the AI, really machine learning, optimize creative based on every attribute we know about a site visitor. And it's relatively new, but we're starting to see significance on some of it, which suggests it's going to work out well for us. So those are the main ways, and that's the real AI. And then the third arena is creative. And we haven't seen any Gen AI tools for creative that work well for us. I know in some industries, if you're making a toaster, it probably works well enough to stick it on different kitchen counters. But our products really perform best when there's people in them, a mother and a baby, and Gen AI is definitely not there for generating babies that don't have 17 fingers yet. So we haven't seen it yet, but it's close. It's getting there. I think, by next year, this time will be a different conversation on the creative Gen AI form.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen some good examples of it, but it's the little things, right? It's like removing some backgrounds or changing the background or something like that, not generating the entire image. I think to your point, you get 17 fingers and it's like, okay.
I can't wait though. I don't want to do shoots anymore.
I know I've seen some cool stuff out there. I don't know how much of it was all AI or not, but what about in the measurement arena? I imagine, there's a lot of data, right? And it's a lot of numbers to crunch and it takes a while. Have you seen any good uses of AI in the measurement space?
Not really, frankly. I think the main application there would probably be around MTA or MMM and, towards incrementality testing.
Okay.
And, just a very clear cause and effect. Serve ads here, don't serve them there. What happens when you do that? I haven't seen any kind of AI-driven analytics that would work or that I would believe in.
Okay. You mentioned with AI, you mentioned the A, B, C, D, E, F, the testing of the different pages. And it makes me think about this personalization promise that we've been talking about for 20, 30 years in the space since the beginning. And we never quite got there. And then when we get too close, people think it's creepy. So I'm just curious. I don't know what the solution is that you use if you want to share what it is, but I have to imagine, I mean, from a personalization perspective, I can see how that could be really cool. Are you seeing that actually have an impact on engagement from shoppers and ultimately conversions?
Yes, it's interesting. We're really, because we have one customer, which is a pregnant woman, we don't need personalization in the traditionally discussed form where, a fashion company does, because they need to know the age, the size, whether they prefer dresses or skirt. I mean, a million different attributes.
Yeah.
And we also don't get repeat visitors in the same way. We do a little bit, and increasingly so as we've built out our product set, but very little. So for us, personalization is more, this banner works better on mobile than desktop. So, and we know whether a person's on mobile or desktop. And by the way, the tool is Evolve AI.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And things like that, more on the data set that we know about anonymous visitors, because we don't really have sign-ins or known customers, and personalizing to that, whether they came from this ad or that ad, things like that, is a lot more important for us than knowing that it's Jenny who loves only black shoes, not red shoes.
How do you, talking about all this different tech, whether it's from Shopify or from a vendor, when you or your team comes to you and says, we need something to fix this problem, what is your typical process? I mean, do you have like some go-to places where you do a search? Do you talk to some colleagues? Do you have what's your process? And then how does that get carried through the organization to evaluate a solution?
Yeah, at this point in time, I think both myself and most of the senior people on my team who would be in a position to request a new tool have big enough networks that we'll almost always go to our network first. And so if someone says, hey, check out this awesome new vendor, I saw them at a conference, whatever, I'll go talk to 3 other CMOs and say, hey, are you guys using this? Do you know anything about it? Or I'll search, the history of one of the Slack boards I'm on, something like that. And then provided I get good feedback, I'll say, okay, guys, go ahead, take a demo. I'll join. Let's see what they're about. But generally, it's all network-driven evaluation wherever possible.
Other than crying babies, what if anything keeps you up at night as you think about your tech stack and everything that you rely on from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple challenges or blind spots, really. So anything that I can't measure with incrementality is something of a blind spot, and I don't love. So influencer is certainly one of them. Amazon sponsored ads, like understanding the incrementality of Amazon sponsored ads is a big one. And you can do regression analysis or time series analysis, but they're not causal. So understanding the true impact of non-testable and incrementality testable channels is something that keeps me up a little bit. And then, I think just some of the bigger industry-wide changes. So things like elections spiking CPMs, and what are you going to do to combat that? Things like algorithms blowing up, like Facebook does from time to time. How do you handle that? How do you recover from that? So those types of kind of seismic, typically temporary hits, and navigating around them, I think are challenges always for everyone.
Yeah, don't put too much faith or trust in the robots.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you look ahead to the future, do you think about different technologies? Are there anything out there that you see coming, or we talked about creative and how AI can impact creative? Anything else you see coming that you've heard about that's been presented to you or that you wish existed?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple things. I love a robot that constantly did incrementality tests on all my channels and reallocated spend based on what I was saying. Like, take me out of a job, please. That'd be great. But I think there are a couple things that are really promising. Facebook kind of teased this. I don't know where it's currently at, and we don't have access to it. But incrementality-based bidding is something that I think at some point all the channels could or should implement. The inability of the big channels to speak to each other, like what you're saying about, the tripling attribution, like, no, we're not getting 3x the revenue. So figuring out how to bid to really ensure you're maximizing not just LTV, but incremental LTV. I think there's opportunity there. And if Facebook really does start ingesting the results of incrementality tests or something else, I think that would be a really big advantage for any of the platforms, but ideally all of the big ones would do it. That's something I'm most excited about, I would say.
Yeah, I have to think you hit on something there. I mean, the walled gardens, all these different platforms, and you're running all this media, and obviously there's overlap. Like, how do you go about protecting yourself, right? It's never going to be perfect, but like, how do you go about ensuring that you're not double spending or double counting? Whether, if you want to advertise in multiple platforms, or even if you wanted to get into TV or something, like, how do you account for that, especially with your background?
Yeah, so the only way that we've done it scientifically, and one of the few ways you can really, is with kind of multi-cell incrementality tests, where you vary budget across channels and different cells. But again, these cells have to be geo-testable, so you have to be able to target geos and have holdout rates. But that's the best way. And then you see very specifically, it turns out spending more on TikTok versus Facebook isn't as incremental, it doesn't drive as much incremental business. That was the test that we actually ran with House. And we found out that we couldn't scale TikTok anymore. So things like that are a great way to do it. And then, MMM still works directionally, I think, or can work directionally well when it comes to channel mix and not double counting.
Do you think you have an advantage because you have that quant background, that you understand the data, where, no offense to anyone, but like a typical marketer is not going to have that kind of a background? Are they at a disadvantage, or do you suggest they go out and like have that kind of person in-house, or do you think it's enough to work with a tech vendor?
Yeah, so I mean, I would attribute a lot of my success to that background and just understanding basic statistics. I mean, the beautiful thing about online marketing and almost all marketing at this point in time is that there's data. There's so much data out there. And you should be measuring everything you possibly can. Even things that aren't measurable in a traditional way can still be measured with how did you hear post-purchase survey. So like there's data out there. And I think if you're not analyzing it and reallocating and adjusting and reacting to it, you're just missing a piece of the pie, and you're probably at a competitive disadvantage. So I think it's it's been a huge benefit to me and my career. It's one of the first things that I make sure my new hires bone up on. Like I make everyone learn statistical significance and make sure that any test they design, anything they want to test, even creative, that tests are designed to ensure that we're going to hit statistical significance and that they're powered well enough to hit significance. So I think it's really table stakes at this point in time. If there's data out there and you're not using it or reacting to it, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, there are no bad ideas, but there are bad tests, right?
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Just to answer the second part of that question, I mean, I think like we don't have an in-house data scientist. So we do use vendors for a lot of it. Even within Facebook, you can do free lift tests now. Whether you trust them or not is a different story. But to their credit, they did show us that their own Facebook retargeting was not incremental. But we use House for all of our incrementality testing. The beautiful thing about them is that it's really you're outsourcing data scientists, and really want that. So,
yeah, makes sense.
So either way, whether it's in-house and you understand all this and have a data scientist who's designing tests for you, or if you use a vendor like a House, either way is fine.
Yeah, you mentioned a few things today that I think are really important around like trusting your intuition, understanding the math. But like if you were giving advice to a friend, a child, someone that's thinking about or entering this space, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think there's two things. So number one is making sure you understand the statistics. Like take an online class. It's statistical significance is a fairly simple concept, and make sure that you're always kind of keeping it in mind as you look at campaigns that are winning, ad sets that are winning, creative that's winning. Make sure it's winning by enough margin to be significant. And number two, and I think this one, most people, and especially most senior people, don't encourage their teams to do enough, is make sure you're networking. I think a lot of people are afraid that their teams will go find better jobs, and maybe they will. That's on you, though. If you're not giving them the job they merit, that's probably on you. But make sure they're networking. Like, talk to friends. I get most of my good ideas from networking, from conferences, from newsletters, from staying educated and informed on the topic. The beautiful / challenging thing about our industry is it's always changing. So you really have to be on top of things and making sure that you're having some kind of outside influence and that you're exposed to other ideas, marketers, companies, products, other ways of doing things, what's working for them, what's not. And keeping that funnel of new things to test fresh. It's super important.
Yep. Good advice. I have one last question as we head into Q4 for a brand that I imagine you're not dependent on Q4. It's not a holiday type business. How do you approach your marketing in this? Because CPMs are obviously going to go up, especially because this year, because of the election. So how do you think about your marketing efforts? Do you just step aside or scale back? Like, how do you think about it?
It's a pretty crazy thing. There are 2 times of year when we literally step aside. Our products are not really giftable. It's not like, hi honey, look at Merry Christmas, here's a crib mattress. Like, it's not going to work. You're not going to win with that bet. So when CPMs spike and our conversion rates don't, we step aside, we bid way down. So we run a big Black Friday, Cyber Monday, just to make sure that, because everyone else does too, and just make sure we're competitive. And then in December, we go fairly dark. We really cut spend by 2/3 or so. There are still people adding to registries and learning about new baby products. So we want to make sure that we're still there. But I don't want to pay the elevated CPMs and compete with other brands that do see 3x conversion rates. And then another one is Mother's Day. Same thing, like, honey, I got you a crib mattress from Mother's. It's not going to work. So we don't participate in that one either. But yeah, you have to make sure you're participating when and where it makes sense, and that if you're paying a higher CPM, you better have the conversion rate to offset that.
Yeah. Good advice. I think we're going to call it a wrap there. Thank you so much, Aaron, for being our first brand marketer, e-commerce leader on the MarTech Matrix. And we look forward to having you back soon.
Pleasure. Been fun.
Thanks, Aaron.
This episode of the MarTech Matrix was brought to you by the coolest MarTech discovery platform on the planet, Blurbs AI. A place where buyers discover the best MarTech vendors and learn their value without the hassle of a sales pitch. At the same time, it's a place where vendors can be discovered and contacted by buyers. Learn more at blurbs.ai. For show notes and information on upcoming episodes, head on over to themartechmatrix.com. If you would like to learn more about the people and companies appearing on this podcast, send Sean a note at sean@themartechmatrix.com. New episodes of the MarTech Matrix podcast will drop every Monday, so be sure to subscribe with your favorite podcast network so you can stay on top of what's happening in the Matrix.
This episode of the MarTech Matrix is brought to you by Blurbs AI, where brands and agencies go to discover the best MarTech vendors and learn their value without the hassle of a sales pitch. It's a place vendors want to be so that they can be discovered. Check it out for yourself at blurbs.ai.